Hi everyone, it's Beth.
And Ellie. And Avery.
My two little helpers are with me for this part. And welcome back to part 2 of my Kilopad project share from May. If you missed part 1, I will have that linked below. Check that out to see some of the other projects that I made out of this pad. Part 2, this part is just going to be kind of a quick flip through of some of the cards that I made. But if you missed part 1, I used the Natural Luxury pad from Craftsmith, which is through Michaels. The blacks and grays and kind of off-whites made me think of weddings and graduations. So a lot of my projects centered around that. But I got some 12 by 12 scrapbook pages, an 8 by 8 wedding scrapbook, some mini scrapbooks, decorated blocks, gift card holders, bottle tags, mini note cards, and Post-it note holders. So once all of those other projects were done, I tackled greeting cards and got 96 of them out of what was left of this pad. So I went through first and cut down what I could for mats on my card fronts. That's always my first step. And then I also went through all of the cut aparts I had left and tried to figure out how I could use those. So like I said, graduations and weddings were kind of what I envisioned with this pad. There were 2 sheets of 2 different designs that were in this pad that had words. So it was it was meant to be used as like wall art. So it had words like dream until your dreams come true. And then the intention was that you would frame that. I didn't. I ended up cutting those pages apart to use in different ways on my scrapbook pages. This gray pattern in the background was what was left after I cut the words out of the dream until your dreams come true. So I did not want that to go to waste. So I used that as a card mat. Again, the point of me going through these cards is just to show you different ways that you can use up all the scraps that you end up having. This layout is kind of one of my go-to layouts that I usually start with because I can use up a lot of paper on them, because you use a full-size mat and then you get to use another good size chunk of pattern paper for the center element. So you probably see this layout in just about every pad kill project share that I have. There were 4 pages of cut aparts in this pad as well, 2 each of 2 designs. And so there were several like different size ticket elements that you could cut out. So I tried to find ways that I could use those up. And then there were also some of these pointed banners that they had, and they didn't really fit in the other projects I did. So I ended up using those. There were 2 different ones and just did those the same way. This was another cut apart. It has the reverse, circle cut out of the corners. And I just matted it and used it with some die cut flowers here. And then I did a lot of fussy cutting of flowers out of some of the scraps that I had. And a lot of these came from the page of words that was supposed to be wall art. Once I cut the words out, I tried to use up the rest of the paper as much as I could in different ways. Just another one of the cutouts. And then this was just a way that I used up some of the strips I had at the end. I did a lot of die cut of little circles out of some of the little pieces that I had left too. My husband says I could finish these projects so much quicker if I didn't feel like I had to use every last little bit of scrap that I had. And he's probably very right, but then that defeats my purpose of getting as much out of a pad as I can. But these were some more of the ticket elements that were in there. Some smaller ones. This one says live life. 2 of those, and then there was 2 that said grow strong. And also in those pages of words that I cut apart, there were these gold flowers, which I absolutely loved, and wanted them to be focal points of whatever I used them on. So I used 2 of them on my 3x3 Post-it pad holders just because it was like perfect size. But then I just did 2 simple strips behind here with a simple fishtail banner sentiment, just so that my gold flower could really pop off this page. So I really liked that one. Again, just another way of using the cut aparts. And then I actually had some Studio 112 pillow stickers that I'd had in my stash for a long time, and I think Studio 112 comes from Joann's, but I'm not positive. But anyway, I had just a few of those left, so I decided to, even though this paper already had a lot of flowers on the background, I decided to kind of give it a little more dimension, and I had added some fussy cut flowers that tied in with the paper, but then I also added a couple of those puffy stickers just to try and use those up. When I craft, I always end up with tons of strips of different sizes. So in this case, like this is actually two different strips that I pieced together with this gold strip down the middle. The gold strip was also cut out of that page of words that I had. Again, two different pieces that were about the same size. I just tied them together with this strip of the diagonal stripe paper going across the center. Because when you do that, it's, like you just added that strip as kind of a grounding center point, and no one would even know that you had two different pieces of strips of paper that you pieced together to get that. Again, varying strips. Strips is kind of the theme of a lot of the cards in this pack, but I just cut these down to the same size, like I think it was about 4 inches each by maybe an inch, and then spaced them out equally and used that as the mat for this element. And again, here's one of those gold strips that I had cut out of the word paper that was supposed to be wall art, and then just used a border punch to kind of give that flower paper a little bit more detail. Again, strips used in a different way. This cut apart was a journaling spot that I couldn't find a use for in my other projects, and so there's lines behind here, and I covered those up with this thanks sentiment, and then I just added the brads just to tie in with the gold and the flowers that were back there. So this is, and a lot of times when you have cutouts, like you're going to have journaling cards, some of the journaling cards are nice because they don't actually have journaling lines on them, but sometimes you do get the journaling lines, and you can always cover those up somehow to be able to use the journaling piece in your cards if you can't use it in scrapbooking. Again, strips tied together to be my card mat for the sentiment on the front. There was some off-white paper that almost looked like linen. It's got like a linen pattern, and then it had these gold circles. And so I cut a strip that had one gold circle on the end so I could stamp Happy Anniversary on it, and then cut a piece that had a couple of the gold circles on it, and then layered on some fussy cut gold flowers that I cut out of one of those other pages. Again, just different ways to use the strips and my little scraps that I cut down into little circles or hearts. There are several card sketches out there that show you how you can layer like different size strips together. So I have several different variations of these. This one is actually some of those words cut from the paper that I said was supposed to be wall art. Like I didn't necessarily like I didn't like it for art for my wall, but I liked the sentiments that it said, and so I kind of pieced these two together out of the whole page. Was Love You Always. Again, a way to use those 12 by 12 art type pages that they intend for you to frame and hang on your wall. If you can't use them for background paper, like if you can cut them apart, get what elements you can, use what elements you can off the page, whether it be, that you fussy cut some flowers or circles, or if it's got words, if you can use the words somehow, the strips. And then what was solid color, like I did a lot of die cutting out of that. And then worst case, if you still can't use it, you can turn it over to the white side as long as it's not double-sided, and use the back to stamp your sentiments on. Again, this was just me layering some of those different size strips and squares that I had. Just different variation. I love those gold flowers. And then this was another type of strip that I cut out of those pages with the words. And when you get down to the end, you end up with either a lot of little pieces or some skinny strips. And these are, I cut these down into 1-inch squares and then just kind of piece them together, almost like a quilted feel, I guess. This is one of my go-tos for little squares as well. And then this was a cut apart from the cut apart pages, and it was blank. Like it had the wood grain kind of background for the arrow, and then it was blank on the off-white part, and so I just stamped thinking of you on that. So again, even things that are sometimes meant to be for journaling, you can totally turn them into a sentiment for a card. These were little tag cut aparts that I used, and this "and" sign was also a cut apart that I fussy cut out. And I just put the two tags to kind of angle them together and then anchored them down with a bunch of circles. Again, some more gold flowers that I fussy cut that I couldn't let go to waste. Tried to make them the main part of this card, so I kept the rest of the card pretty simple. Thought that would be a pretty wedding card. Different ways that you can use squares on your cards. Like these are 1.5-inch squares, and then they're backed by a 3.5-inch square to act as the mat. So these two I did a circle sentiment in the center and then just added another circle and flower element on the bottom strip. This one I did the opposite, put my big flower as my circle in the center of the squares, and then put my sentiment down here on that strip. And again, these flowers are just die cuts from the cardstock that I use in my other projects. Instead of layering two different size pattern paper strips, this one I layered one pattern paper strip and then a stamped cake, wedding cake that I had left over from my scrapbooks. Just wanted to use those up. Again, different way to use the strips. I have one I cut down into a fishtail banner that went vertical, and then another strip behind it that goes horizontal. And then was just trying to use up some of the stamped items as well as some of the die cut flowers that I had left. And same with that. And then my 7-year-old helped me make some cards one day, and she loves Wink of Stella. So can you see all of the shimmer on this card? She covered the whole card with Wink of Stella. But she kind of used that same method where she used the strips as the mat on the front of her card and then did a circle sentiment, and then she punched out some flowers from black cardstock and then Wink of Stella those, and then did the sentiment, and then just decided to do the whole card. But this one I think she did really good on. She followed a sketch on this one too, but she cut out her own fishtail banners. And then she used my Big Shot to cut out some circles, and then did her own stamping, and then she added some butterflies, little die cut butterflies in there as well. So she's 7, so I think she did a really good job. This "and" sign was another part of those words. But I just did a circle punch on the "and" made it the center of my flower. And again, I fussy cut this out of that same page. And then again, using more strips on the back of my card. And this one, different way to use some of the little scrap strips that I had left. Lots of strips. This one I just pieced together a couple different pieces of pattern paper that I had left. And this fishtail element was cut out of the papers that were with the words as the main focus. Tried to use up every piece of that I could. And then this one was just using up different size scraps. And this layout I saw Christy Marcotte use in one of her 6x6 pad tutorials. So it's kind of become one of my go-tos for at the end when you have a bunch of strips. If you can find any that are the same width that you can cut down to the same length, then you could just mat those and turn that into the center focal point of your card. So I have like all different sizes in here, different lengths and widths. It all just depended on what I had left at the end. I ended up being able to make quite a few of these with those strips. So I don't know why I end up with so many strips. Again, a different way to use the strips, and because I got tired of strips, I switched to circles. And these are 1.5 inch circles. I did a couple of them, like whatever I could get a 1.5 inch circle out of, I punched that out. And then so there's 4 circles and then 2 border strips on the side, and then just kind of finished it off with whatever little element that I had left. Some I think have flowers, but these have hearts. And once I run out of scraps that I could fit 1.5 inch circles out, I moved to 1 inch circles and did a couple of those as well. Again, some different ways to use your strips. I took a border punch and some cardstock and cut out either side of this strip to act as a mat for my pattern paper, just to give it a little more intricate feel. Cut a bunch of strips that were close to the same width and length, cut those down into fishtail banners, and then I had a bunch of die cut flowers left that I was trying to use up, so I put a big one back here behind this fishtail just to kind of break it up from the other fishtails that were around. Same thing on that one. And if you have little thin strips, here's another way to use up some of those scraps. I got a bunch of these, and again, using what other little scraps I could find just to get some little circle die cut elements out of there, just to finish off some of the cards. And I usually try to use up as much of the pattern paper as my mats as I can, but then I always get to a point where I'm out of large size pattern paper for mats, so I ended up going into my stash for some for embossed cardstock, or like I would use plain cardstock on some of them. And last, I have some where I used a bunch of little circles. So these I think are 1 inch circles, and you can fit 12 of them on an A2 size card. Just space them out. And I just tried to make sure that I didn't have the same patterns next to each other, and that they were all the same color next to each other. Just kind of tried to spread those out. And if it was a plain piece, sometimes I would add a little to it just to give it a little more decoration. In this case, I added hearts, and then just added a sentiment kind of down here towards the bottom across the circles. So that's it. Thanks for sticking with me through all these cards. Like I said, I got 96 cards out of this after I did some other big projects out of this pad, which is really awesome. Some of the cards are going to go for sale in my Etsy shop, and some are for my own personal use, and then most of them will go to Cards for Soldiers, which is an organization that collects handmade cards, sends them to soldiers stationed overseas so that they can send them home to their friends and family. We are always looking for card makers, so if you have excess cards lying around that you're not going to use, or if you have a bunch of paper to use up and can make some cards, we desperately need help because we are continually adding troops and bases overseas, and so we have a growing need for more handmade cards. I will include a link for that below as well if you want to check that out. After all was said and done, I did have some die cut or cut apart, like little cut apart pieces that I just couldn't use or ran out of steam to use. And I'm just going to include these with the scrapbooks that I sell, so whoever the recipient can either do some additional journaling or add some additional embellishment. And then I also had some little tags as well that I cut out of some of those pages that I cut the words out of. So again, I will include these along with some of the die cuts so that the recipient of the scrapbooks can do journaling or embellishing. And those were the usable pieces that I had left. And so whatever was usable, I ended up cutting it down into banner strips, fishtail banners, or the tags, or just did little shapes with die cuts out of what I could. And then I have a whole pile of unusable scraps. So I don't ever show the unusable portions because no one wants to see my pile of trash, basically. But I really do try to use everything that I can, and so I end up with a fairly good size pile of this that I've cut out everything that I can. You know, as you can see in this piece, like I've cut several different things out of that little piece until I couldn't cut anymore. So you're always going to have some waste. And again, my husband says if I didn't care about using it all up, I could be done so much quicker and be so much less stressed. But that kind of defeats my purpose of these. So thanks again for sticking with me. I hope you got some good ideas on how to use up your scraps or how to use up some of the paper that you have lying around. If you did get some good ideas like this video, please give me a thumbs up and subscribe for future videos. And stay tuned because my next month's, or actually my June, that I haven't quite started yet because I was finishing up my June pad kill, I'm going to do a video on how I get started on that. So you always see the back end. I'm going to kind of show you the front end process as well. So thanks again, guys. Have a great day.